Conversation with a Geographer. I'm Mike DeVivo, Professor of Geography at Grand Rapids Community College, and today we're very fortunate to have Guntram Herb. He is the Professor of Geography at Middlebury College in Vermont. Guntram, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Mike, for having me on your show, I guess. It's wonderful to chat with you about geography, which is a subject I love and have, been part of my life for a long time.
Absolutely. It's obvious you have a great passion for it, and I'm so happy that you could be here. Tell me, if you could reflect upon your childhood, adolescence, and early years, was there anything that really inspired you to consider geography as a field to study?
Yeah, it was my father, who was kind of a geographer at heart, even though that was not what he did. But he grew up and he had been given an atlas by an uncle. It was an older atlas that had still some blank spots in it. And he wanted to become a geographer. And when he got older, he realized the world had been discovered. So he traveled a lot. And geography was so important to him that we had a big world map next to the kitchen table where we always ate. So anytime, he would come home for lunch, would turn the news on first to kind of see what was going on in the world, and he would point to places on the map. Oh, look, this is where it is. And it was just a wonderful way to get introduced to the diversity of the world and all the different places you can go. So if there's any formative experience, it's sitting around the kitchen table eating whatever it was, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and experience the world through the map.
Well, that's a wonderful story. And you went to school in Stuttgart in your elementary years and afterward. When you were going to school, wasn't geography taught as an integral element in the classroom?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in elementary school, they teach really the local geography, like, Stuttgart. They show you, they had us draw a little diagram of all the
sort of like the French genre d'Avis,
Right.
of certain
Exactly.
places, and you would start local, and then as you advance in years, you move to larger regions.
Yeah. And then, so we did that locally in elementary school. And then in high school, gymnasium, as it's called in Germany, with the track that gets you to college, we had a pretty intensive geography, and I loved the subject. It was very diverse. I had a very good teacher. I mean, he even taught us about that there is dry rice and wet rice. And when I was in a seminar in Tübingen where I ended up studying geography, and this older professor was totally taken aback that I knew that there was dry rice as well. And that, well, who was your teacher? Did he go to Tübingen? I said, no, he didn't. But anyway, so I loved Tübingen. I loved the geography there. It was good. But one of the things that excites me about geography is just to learn new things. And I got kind of a little bored, I would guess, after 2 years of thinking there must be more to this. So I applied for a study abroad, and I got a funding to go to Berkeley for a year. And that really was another experience to open my eyes to the rich field that geography was. I was taking classes in natural hazards, something they didn't offer at all in Germany, and also radical geographies with Michael Watts and Richard Walker. That was another experience that
A very rich experience for an undergraduate, especially.
Yeah, well, the German system is, when you go to university, you basically go for a master's. So you cannot go undergrad. So when I went to Berkeley, I had just kind of passed my intermediary exam. So I was technically, for Berkeley, I was a grad student.
Okay.
I had passed that, and that was helpful because I got into much better classes.
Sure.
So getting into Michael Watts
Absolutely.
and Richard Walker's classes. And those were really formative and interesting. Barney Nietzschman was there as well, but didn't have a chance to take a class with him. And Richard Hall was there too.
What about students? Any fellow students that were influential at all while you were there
No,
that you could recall? No.
I can recall I was, this was Berkeley for a German kid to be in San Francisco, in the Bay Area. And I lived in the International House, which is on campus. And half the students there are foreigners and half are Americans. And I met a lot of different foreigners. I met people from Iran, from France, I mean, European countries, I mean, all over the place, India. And that was really inspiring as well to have this international dimension. So I guess for me, always geography is also international. But I couldn't pinpoint a specific student.
Sure. Well, and you were there for such a short time as well, and it takes a while for those relationships to blossom,
Right.
Especially for a foreign student. I mean,
Right.
it must be more difficult. So you had this experience at Berkeley, and then you returned to Germany?
Yeah, well, I met my future wife in Berkeley too, not at the university, and fell madly in love. And so I actually returned to California to do my master's thesis on the economic effects of the Mount St. Helens eruptions. So I went up there, and that was another dimension I hadn't thought about looking at. So I got into hazards a little bit. I finished my degree in Germany and then applied to go to University of Wisconsin-Madison for a PhD. And I came as a hazard student, but very early on, the first few weeks, I met two really influential people. So I met the late David Woodward, History of Cartography, and
Yes.
I actually got hired to work as an illustrations editor for him. I had always loved maps, obviously, having seen the world map on my.
Really the dean of historical cartography, one would think.
Oh yeah, and then there was J. Brian Harley was part of the team of doing the History of Cartography project that I got involved in, and that was really inspiring. And then I met Mark Basson, a political geographer, who kind of got me interested in German geopolitical maps because he was interested in the interwar period. And that was a total eye-opener as well. So I combined the two, and my thesis was about figuring out what did the geopolitical maps in Germany, were they propaganda? Did they actually have another function? And that ended up my first book, Under the Map of Germany. And it was a good combination to have political and cartography or history of cartography combined. And there I have some influential friends. I met, Dave Kaplan.
Sure.
We became buddies very quickly and fast, and you can see.
Great geographer.
Yes, and that continued. We did all these projects together. We did a few edited volume. We did an encyclopedia together. So, and an atlas. So that's a really important friendship and a professional relationship. But there were also many other people who I'm still in contact with or who have influenced my thinking. So Karen Till, Tim Cresswell. There was a lot of different geographers who were very active from Madison, who I still kind of follow their work, and they're interesting and inspiring. Stephen Silvern, some of them ended up writing for some of the edited volumes we did for us as well.
Well, Madison certainly produced a very large share of stellar scholars that have really produced work that has withstood the test of time. From the time you were, years before you were there and until long after. I suspect when you were there, was David Ward still on the faculty, or had he gone into
Oh, yeah.
administration then?
Well, he had got into administration, but he was still teaching. I took actually my kind of the prep course every grad student had to take to defend their proposal. And David Ward could strike fear in people's hearts. And I remember one thing. We were discussing geography and why people always ask what is geography or they don't know it. And I said, and I made the kind of a snap reply saying something like, well, I think they have kind of maybe it's low self-esteem or something. And he just wouldn't have it. He said, I certainly wouldn't think Carl Sauer had a problem with self-esteem. So anyway, but he was excellent. He gave me some really good feedback on developing my proposal for the PhD, and the class was really good. It was a history of geographic thought. I still draw from that too, because that's one of the things I teach. So.
Mm-hmm. Had Ifu Tuan arrived yet from Minnesota when
yeah.
you were there?
Ifu was there. I that's maybe the biggest regret, never having taken a class with him. Mm-hmm. But I did sit in his office. Ifu would send these dear colleague letters. Mm-hmm. And he would, end it by saying something. So I threw down the gauntlet. So I would go into his office and say, here is your gauntlet. I picked it up. And then we had a wonderful conversation for, and with Ifu, you have a conversation. It lasts an hour or more. It was wonderful. What a mind.
He is certainly brilliant. We have really, really lost a diamond in our discipline with his relatively recent passing. But he has contributed so much and was one of the greatest thinkers I think our discipline has ever had. Certainly in this country.
Yeah. That's one thing I loved about him too. He was always open to new ideas. And to me, that's the inspiration, is to, I get bored when I study the same thing. So if you look at my publications, you can see, okay, I did some nationalism stuff, but I always try to go and do something else because I need to see something new.
Well, so, and your research has, I think, I think if we could say that there's a brand of your research, we could say that it's characterized by some eclecticism.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and especially most recently, I shifted into studying indigenous borderlands, particularly the border between the U.S. and Canada, and that grew out of kind of my personal life because my wife is a member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians, and we attended a gathering, an Eagle Staff gathering on a reservation. And some of the members that were going to talk, and she also got an eagle feather during that time. And so we were like waiting, and it just didn't take off. And people had been delayed at the border. So a group of part of the tribe, so the tribe is divided by the U.S. border. So there's Garden River on the other side and Bechuanaland, and there's Bay Mills and the Sioux tribe on the American side. And members from the other side, from the Canadian side, were stopped at the border, and they asked them, what's your nationality? And they answered North American. And apparently Border Patrol did not like that answer. And so they took their party aside, and they asked all this documentation because they had eagle parts, they had eagle staffs. And the people were very upset. They told afterwards during the teachings that, they did not have a right to do that because of the Jay Treaty. We can pass freely as Native Americans who are Native Americans. And they weren't supposed to go through our stuff or ask us these questions. And I'd never heard of the Jay Treaty, 1794. So I thought, interesting. So I looked into it, and not even many of my history colleagues knew a lot about this phenomenon. And so I noticed that there were all these native tribes that were divided by the US-Canadian border. So the border crossed them. And then I looked and wanted to read more about it and realized there was very, very little written about it. So there was only really one book that was about 140 pages thick. That was the only really comprehensive treatment of all the borders of the US that involved Native Americans. So I decided, okay, as a geographer, go to the field. I can, as a non-Indigenous person, I can't speak for Indigenous people, but I can learn. So I bought a really old camper van and fixed it up, pulled out all the interiors, made new beds, and we traveled from Maine, New Brunswick to the West Coast the first summer of a sabbatical and back. And the next summer we traveled from Maine to New Brunswick all the way to Alaska, and we just zigzagged the border and talked to about 30 different communities and learned a lot of things. And that was the best sabbatical and the best research project in the field I've ever had.
That's
go
great.
back.
And so you're continuing on this track then to essentially examine the geography of Indigenous people in Canadian U.S. borderlands.
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked by one of the chiefs to write a history of one of the tribes and in Michigan, and so I'm going to be spending July meeting with local Native Americans to talk about it, and that will involve also going across the border and talking to the Canadian parts of the tribe. So the work will continue. Again, I can only work together with another Native person because I'm not Native and I can't speak for it, but it certainly is incredibly enriching. And what I'm trying to bring in is my knowledge of geography and writing and publishing. So it should be an interesting project. The other person I'm working with, Richard Lewis, he is excited to work with me and get started on it. So, yeah.
Well, and being an academic geographer who has the analytical skills and the passion to examine this particular phenomenon, you add a lot of credibility to this kind of research, especially since you are from the outside. For you are not necessarily tasked with being defensive about a particular viewpoint. You don't have to carry a bias.
Yeah, I mean, to me, my research has always been guided by the Anishinaabe word minadindamowin, which means respect, because ultimately to learn about is a privilege and an honor to see what Native Americans experience and on the border and to learn from them. And I think we're at a crossroads that Native Americans are really being seen as the foundation of the whole region of North America. And they have lived there for millennia and have lived there in kind of harmony with nature. And I think in all the challenges with global warming and everything else, we can really learn a lot from this old traditional oral history, gives us some indication of what was, brought down through the ages. And so I'm really excited to learn more about that dimension as well.
Well, I'm not the only one that is going to be excited to see your work. It'll be intriguing for sure. And this is one example of how academic geographers can work with non-academic entities and contribute to the greater public's understanding of the importance of not only the work that geographers do, but really make a contribution to really social justice in so many ways.
Yeah, and I think it's also really important for academic geographers to be kind of brought down to the level of regular discourse and regular writing. It's something that has always bothered me is that we tend to like kind of obtuse writing, and I think that's not good for us as a discipline, and we really got to work on making things more accessible.
We tend to accentuate words with many syllables, which is not really a good idea.
Yeah. Right.
I won't continue in that trajectory, but let me ask you, you arrived in Middlebury after you received your PhD at Wisconsin?
Yeah.
And talk about what the department was like when you arrived. Because this is a very important department in our country because it's a private institution where there are few geography departments overall, and it's a stellar department, always has been. There might be, its only peers might be Dartmouth and Macalester in terms of offering geography degrees and having programs or student bodies that would be attracted to that same high level of learning. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Middlebury has a superb geography department now. I'm really proud to be a member of that, and it has always been open to change. And right now we have developed a really superb GIS program as well as an environmental geography program. So we have a few really outstanding young untenured people that I would like to see tenured before I retire.
But when you arrived, what was the department like when you arrived?
It was well known. There had been a transition. There were like the older people like Malmström and Roland Illich who had been retired. And so it was, there were a few older, well, they weren't much older than I was, but they were established, and I was one of the young Turks that had to prove themselves to it. It was not always easy to be there. The demand in teaching was something I had not been familiar with. I was a research assistant for most of my time at Wisconsin. I had taught one course, and I literally jumped in on the deep end, but I've always loved teaching. So I kind of found my way and enjoyed it. And one of the things that Middlebury, the structure of it is really nice, is that we have a J term. It's like an intense intermission between fall and spring semester. And during J term, you can teach whatever you want. And I love that because obviously when you get hired at a department, you have to teach the courses that need to be taught. And so during J term, for example, I developed a course on geography and empire, which I developed into a course, the geography of war, and got so excited about that I ended up being the chair of the specialty group, which blew me away because I wasn't in the Army, so they nevertheless elected me to it. And that experience was terrific as well, to see military geographers at West Point at a very high level. So maybe a last word on Middlebury is the students we have are outstanding, and they accomplish feats that you wouldn't think undergraduates are possible that they're able to do that. Right now I'm working on an atlas It's a textbook with lots of maps. And I have 9 research assistants currently working with me on making the maps. I've had a total of 15 working on this Atlas project, and they make beautiful maps under my guidance. And that sort of engagement with students, involving them in creating things together is something that I value immensely, and I learn from the students, and it's a wonderful thing.
I get the impression that it's your generation, really, that has contributed to this shift, maybe a paradigm shift in terms of teaching and learning. Whereas in Illich's generation, he was certainly a good scholar in terms of what he was doing in a lot of ways. He did a lot of work in the geography of dairying, for example, in New England and Vermont in particular. And it's my understanding when the department was threatened with a termination, he was really a stalwart defender that was able to make a convincing argument for geography to be maintained there. But as many of that generation, it was more a matter of being the sage on the stage kind of teaching that was taking place, where it was upon the shoulders of the students, their responsibility to learn, whether they got the information or not. Whereas your generation, I think, has really shifted in the beginning to engage in that sharing of tasks so that students collaborate with their professors more and are able then to learn as they do things more experientially. Just a thought.
No, I agree. I mean, it was really, I mean, part of my research, my interest is also radical geographies. And so the engaged pedagogy of Paulo Freire, something that has always inspired me in my teaching. And that kind of engaged scholarship that is not something, or is engaged teaching and scholarship together is not something that existed with Roland Illich. Roland Illich was an incredible person. I mean, incredible scholar and wise teacher and everything else, but it was a different sort of teaching.
A different era.
Exactly. So it was changing. And, you know, I could maybe add to your original question that I was a little bit evasive. When I came, there was the existing people who were running the department were traumatized by that experience of almost having been terminated by this president that came in and then tried to terminate it. And then he left again because he was trying to do all kinds of crazy stuff. And that kind of traumatized the department, that they were looking at every new person coming in. Is that person going to jeopardize our department in the future? So it was more difficult to try to do new things as a result of that. The geography of war, I did get tenure, and I was told that maybe the geography of war was not mainstream enough, that, you know, I should stick to urban or economic or the foundational courses. Well, a couple of years after that, you know, it became a really big hot topic all over. And so anyway, that was kind of what happened initially, that it was more challenging for that reason. But certainly the department was always encouraging scholarship, and the college itself is incredibly supportive for hiring students, for example. So there's a big engagement, and the whole college is going towards, you know, getting students involved, co-publishing with students. I just had a piece with 2 of my students on indigenous borderlands in the Borders of Globalization Review. So to work with students and publish together is just terrific and so enriching for professors. So I would recommend any
Oh,
other
absolutely, absolutely.
do that.
It's very enriching to work with students in that way, for sure. And I interrupted you earlier when you were talking about Middlebury today as we ventured into the past, and you talked about your colleagues. Would you care to discuss your current colleagues anymore?
I love my colleagues. As I said, we have three junior people who are untenured, who are just, in my opinion, exceptional. So there's, and then we have another three other tenured people who are doing work in their own right that I deeply respect. They do very different things than I do. And again, that's something I really like. I mean, I could name them all, but I don't want to make this a
Sure, it's okay.
naming session. But they're terrific scholars, each of them in their own right, and they do different things than I do. I do less GIS based work because I do political work where it doesn't really fully fit, or radical work, but it can, but not in the way I do it. So, but there is respect on both sides that we have different geographies. And I think the richness, the emphasis on having a diverse set of classes and offering our students a diverse set of opportunities is one of the strengths of our department.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you have really certainly one of the leading programs in a liberal arts college in the United States, if not the leading program in geography. It's in terms of the liberal arts colleges. And,
Right.
and so you have a select group of students that may not realize how valuable their experience at Middlebury might be until they're much older.
Yeah, well, there's Dartmouth. I mean, we have to say that's another.
Certainly, yeah.
It's another incredible one. But
Indeed.
you know, we're realizing more and more that students are, because I think the APs in geography have helped to bring students in to Middlebury where they have heard of geography before. So we have now students who come in and they have taken AP and they want to actually do more geography. But there's also, we have a pretty good reputation, I think, on campus, and students are coming in and discovering geography. There is still students who discover us in their senior year and going like, darn, I should have gone earlier because this is what I really wanted to do. But it's getting better. I think the word is getting out that geography is an incredible opportunity for anyone. You can study, well, everything takes place, right? So you can study anything you want. That certainly was what I've always liked about it. You can study anything you want from a geographic perspective. And geography, you know, geographers know where it's at, I would say.
I think you hit the nail on the head, that's for sure. Now, I'm going to ask you to reflect upon your career so far and to think about some words of advice you might give aspiring undergraduate students interested in geography, or maybe even graduate students in geography, and maybe even some comments for colleagues. You know, do you have anything to offer?
That's a pretty tall order.
It is, but you're just the person to fill it.
I'm not sure about that, but to me, I would say try something new. Don't get too comfortable in what you're doing. You know, just like in traveling, you have to go out, and you know for sure you have traveled in many places, and there's always the unknown, which makes it exciting and scary, maybe. But the only advice I can give is try something new. If you have studied a certain kind of geography for a few years, explore something else. Explore something you have no idea about, and you will discover that there is wonderful things in the unknown. So I think to keep the explorer in us, and that gives me a chance to kind of come full circle to my dad, who wanted to become an explorer. And ultimately, you can still be an explorer today. It's just not maybe finding places that haven't been recorded, but you can find places that you haven't recorded or you haven't looked at, and that's what I would do.
Those are very prudent comments, and I think very fitting to task all of us to consider maybe in adopting your brand of eclecticism when we pursue our own research interests. What's wrong with going to a different field within our discipline? Because the world is what we examine, or little parts of it. There are things that we can always learn. Guntram, thank you so much for spending this time with us today. It's been a wonderful chat.
Well, thank you, Mike, for having me on your show, and thank you for your wonderful suggestions of questions and kind of how you picked up the line and made me go in a different direction at times. So again, you helped me explore it as well. Thank you.
You're very kind. Thank you so much once again. And this concludes this episode of Conversation with a Geographer. Thank you.